Well, I'll just rattle off, and then I don't think you want a record on what I'm trying to. I'll tell you about the city first, what I know, and then you can stop me or run me back over it later if you'd like or whatnot. But Mr. Green and Lumsden, they were more or less one first settled this community here, come to here. And the city of Wilson got its name. There's a lot of argument on that, and I imagine you'll run on to that. But there was 28 leagues, I believe it was, of Wilson County school land that they had bought over. That's what they'd come to here. And then Woodrow Wilson was president, and then there's a representative named Wilson. Well, according to old timers like W.H. May, Lonnie Lumsden, Green, the town got its name from the representative Wilson. Now, we've got a museum. I would like for you to see that. It used to be the old Wilson Mercantile. At one time, there's somewhat of a store there. They had the agency on John Deere tractors, and all such as that. Post office and bank both was there in this building. That's the building there on the corner. Mm-hmm. And that's where Wilson Mercantile Green, they had a fellow named Williams running the store. Of course, we all thought he run the store, and he did. And he's quite a character. He's an old Spanish War veteran. Mr. Green, he come in there one day, the old man Green, he's laying the law down to him, you know, what he must do, what not do. He said, I don't need to remind you that I've got controlling interest. He had 51% interest. Old man went down on it. Counting pulled out a sawed-off shotgun. He had a grip on it, you know, like a 45 Hammer. He said, here's the controlling interest right here. He said, Green agreed with him right quick. That'll be right. I'm talking about outlaws, but they're not. They're just good early seasoned citizens that we all loved and loved very much. And Mr. Green and Lonnie, they settled this country largely with Dutchmen from South Texas, Germans from, well, a lot of them come from Shiloh. Down in there, they trade this land here on, take land in down there. They become very rich. They were ranch people too. They had a big ranch here, and then another one out towards Boundfield.
I wonder how it was they got interested in this country here, Mr.
You know, I'm not sure about that, but Lumsden, some of them thought he was adopted son, Lonnie Lumsden, but I don't think it was. I believe he might have been some kid. But Mr. Green treated him just like an adopted son or whatnot. And he was at Spur. He was a typical cattleman. He and his wife. I wish you could have known them both. And they tell me he come in here with a suitcase full of money and bought this land out, but he's buying it for, I believe, I shouldn't say the old man Green, I believe it's Bill Green. There's Bill Green, Dick Green, his son, and Lumsden. And if you could just know them now on the mercantile up there, I'd like for you to see that. The center, you must do that. It now then a museum that belongs to the city. Some of them think Mrs. Green gave them that for a memorial of their family. But a fellow named Judge Hudson, I knew I was going to forget the name. Oh, he's a money man there in Lubbock, Judge Hudson or something like that. He's got his name in today's paper there. I don't want to tell things wrong, but he gave this to the city more or less for a write-off. Sad. But we're very proud of it. You might have noticed in here where they're really running for city council up there, Robert.
Oh, Dove Harris?
Hmm?
Dove Harris?
No.
I got so many of those candidates I couldn't.
Such cheese there. Direction. He gave this to the city, and we're very proud of it. I think the first offered it to Pauper. And they turned it down. That was for county project. But we have it there. We advanced seniors get 2 meals a week there on wheels brought out from Tahoka. Get together there Friday night and play 42 and dominoes. We enjoy it very much. Well, so much for the city. Would you like to have some of the people that's here? I come here in 1922, in August 1922, in a covered wagon. Brother and I, we were just more kids like. I was about 15, 16, younger brother about 14, but we had an older brother in front, right on the covered wagons. And I don't know, I guess it was something like 3 weeks. Come from near Fort Worth, this side of Fort Worth out here. We had to take our time, The team would come to watering places overnight, whatnot. We'd have to stop and we'd stay over for watering. And it seemed like today, I can't believe it, Mason. Sister, I've got a sister older than me over here. She's 80-something, a widow. I got a brother living in San Benito. So we was going down there to see him. We was going to fly down. And I enjoy the air, so I'm still a little afraid of the air. I feel safe with my feet on the ground. But we got in the plane at Lubbock 11:15. I've got a daughter living in Dallas down there. I knew it was coming. We were going to lay over there. And I have other kinfolks. My sister had a son there, and nephews, and such as that. And they met us. We went out and stayed with them till 5 o'clock. Ate dinner with my daughter. She had dinner ready for us. We left at 5 o'clock and landed in Harlingen at 7:15. Went out and ate supper with my brother. And, I couldn't believe that. Now, you got to try to think. I'm a little bit older than you are, to think traveling like that. Now, is this really true? But the earth is so beautiful after you get up there. You've flown quite a bit, I guess. I've thought to myself several times, some of them claim to be atheists. I wonder if a fellow could ride up there like I've been, see the earth as beautiful as I've seen it a few times, and patterns and the way it's all let off and everything set in its places. And that way I can see God in nature clearer than any other way I imagine I can look at him. I wonder how they could come down and still claim to be an atheist. That's nothing to do with this. I don't know, maybe I shouldn't.
Oh, no, that's all right.
I'd rather...
That's a good story, too, about it taking 3 weeks to get here from Fort Worth and then flying from Lubbock to Fort Worth in about 2 hours.
Well, we come from San Francisco almost as quick. Now, that was my first trip. I come backing out on that. I had a brother that's over. He's gone now. Never gone out there. I had a brother live there down south of San Francisco. And I couldn't turn it down. I was going to go with him. I went over with my sisters. Well, we needed to know what time was leaving and what time we'd get out there, where the folks there would know where to meet us. Went up there and turned back and said we left Lubbock at 9:05 and got out there at 10:23. I said, I'm not going. I mean it. They kept on laughing at me. They tickled him, but see, we gained 2 hours there. We might have got there a little sooner than that. We had to stop and Albuquerque, changed plane, but of course that's changed in a hurry. But we got out there at that length of time. Hard to believe.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how fast it was going. It wasn't beating sound, but we was flying, brother, I'm telling you.
Probably cruising along about 350 or 400 miles per hour, I would guess.
When I coming back, I got time on that from San Francisco back to Albuquerque. It was 1 hour and 49 minutes. And Albuquerque is something like the distance from here to Dallas, and that'd be 45 minutes. That's about what those planes make it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that wasn't what you come to see me about, but you just asked me questions.
Okay,
about,
where I'd like to start is when and where you were born.
I was born on July the 11th, 1906, Erath County, Stephenville. I was born in a big family.
Were you the eldest, or?
No, there's 8 of we boys. We had 2 sisters apiece, which was 2 sisters, of course. But there's a brother younger than me, about 2 years younger. And we'd moved from Stephenville, a little inland town up like Penn. That's about halfway in between Stephenville and Mineral Wells, off from the road, sort of like Wilson's, off from the road from Tahoka to Lubbock. And a little old country doctor come out there. Triplets was born, 3 boys in my home. This doctor brought his drugstore with him, had a suitcase. I wish you could see that. Unfolded that, and there's pretty bottles of medicine, and everything all on each side. He had a little pair of scales he'd weigh these out with. He's just as neat as a woman. And measuring out doses for men. Now, he'd weigh out a little of this and a little of that, however they weigh, and medicine, in grams or something. And had like a putty knife. He'd mix that up real good. Then he'd level it off in a square, and then he'd block it up. That putty knife done all this in little blocks. Had capsules. You've seen capsules, and for a man, he put that in a capsule. This would be a dose, a dose, a dose, and a dose, you see. Now, for babies, there's a different thing then that sounds like everybody had whiskey, and most people did have some in their home to mix medicine. Some of them drank toddies, too. For baby, he'd mix that up. He'd put a little of that in a small piece of paper and wrap it this way and that way and back and have it square. And that was a dose with so many drops of breast milk, so many drops of whiskey. That's the way those kids were. There's 3 boys, and we were way out in the country, 3 baby boys. This neighbor lived, I thought it was a mile or so up there, but I guess it's 200 or 300 yards. Had a young baby, right, young baby. She was a big, stout, healthy lady. She weighed 150, 60 pounds, young, stout, and healthy as a bee. She'd come down there and help suckle those babies. They'd feed her, and that's the way I can remember that the most. They'd just feed her anything and everything she liked to eat. We had lots of cows, and milk and butter and syrup, sorghum syrup, ribbon cane syrup, honey. Oh, she'd eat, I'm saying it's just a sight on earth how much that woman could eat. But she gave enough milk for all of them. And now we lost one when it was about 4 or 5 weeks old there. I don't know what was the cause of death, but we lost one of the babies. The other 2 survived. Teddy Roosevelt, not Theodore, Teddy Roosevelt was president. Now, you talk about some excitement. That brought excitement in that little town of like Penn. Teddy Roosevelt wrote Father a congratulation in longhand. A letter, we don't know where it is today, but if I had it, I wouldn't take $1,000 for it. very nice letter. And people come from far and near, coming in there to see those babies. That's a sight on earth for them.
There were how many?
3
Triplets.
triplets. That's the first been bought there, but they went down in medical books for them. I've got a history book here on that, but that's all right for that.
What were your parents' names? Your parents' names, your father and your mother?
My father was E.J. Hewlett, and he come from Missouri. And he and his oldest brother, he was the youngest of the family, they had a holdings in Arizona. Peach Springs, I don't imagine you know where it is, but Peach Springs named after peach seeds that they planted out there. There's a big spring, about 80 miles to water in a direction. And 1880, the railroad bought them out. Bought their right. They moved out, and they done had them a farm picked out in Missouri. Show you how just little incidents can change a whole course of life. They got to Abilene, Texas. They had to stay over there 3 or 4 or 5 hours to catch their train out. And out walking around town, they met on an old timer they knew from Erath County. And he's telling them what good land, what good grass, and how cheap it was down below Stephenville on the Bosque River. So they just changed their tickets and went down there, and they bought there. Both of them married there. Uncle, the oldest, he's quite a bit older. He come to Plainview, where Plainview is now, a section of land there. There's a little store sold there. He was going to run a hip on this end of an freight wagon train coming in. And a great uncle, my grandmother's brother, John McCormick, he had a ox cart freight that he was running to Amarillo. I think they made most of the money off of whiskey. They called it wet grocers, you know that, but they's bringing that with their grocers out. They's going to change this, extend this route from Amarillo to Plainview, and had the setup and ready to do that. That is 1889 or 90, along about there, about the time that the railroad come on down. That killed him. And my uncle had a baby born there, had 2 little girls, a baby born, and he lost his wife. And he had to get out there and milk wild cows to feed that baby milk. Well, he sold out there, but he owned a section of land, the courthouse. My aunt was buried there somewhere on that courthouse yard there in Amarillo. He went back to Erath and married his first wife's sister. My father, he married there, and he was running Bosque. And then they moved on down to George Creek, Cox's Bend, down below where Glenrose is. A log cabin there, and part of my family was born. My brother and sister was born there in a log cabin he put up himself. Things changed, haven't they?
Well, they sure have, and in a short period of time, too. Well, now your mother, what was her maiden name?
Her name was Annie Frances Roberts. The Roberts and McCormick's grandmother was McCormick. They come from Virginia. They were both in business there, some kind of a stagecoach operation. And they was going to come to Texas. And the McCormicks and Roberts went together and built 2 big floats. What is you call, take log, I forget
Like
what
a pontoon, or?
Yeah, same thing. There's something else I'm trying to think of. Anyhow, they put their household goods and furniture on one, and livestock on another one.
A raft.
Yeah, rafts. Now you got it. And they come down the river, come in and enter what is Old Natchitoches, where it first landed. Now, New Natchitoches is a short distance from there, but it's not where the old Natchitoches was. Then they went out from there. Then they got wagons and other supplies and things. My granddaddy Roberts come to Erath County, and my grandmother and her folks come out Crum in Denton County, near Denton. Soon grandfather Roberts got things settled out and built him a log cabin. He got in a wagon and went over to Denton County and got my grandmother married. They started the sparking on that boat coming down there, so it's quite an adventure, quite a history of that itself. Let me show you a picture of my family, will you mind?
You bet. No, I wouldn't mind at all.
I haven't always known. Ask me what. And you just hold up your hand when you want to stop me.
Okay. Well, Erath County sure is an interesting place. We've done quite a bit of work down there, that country all throughout there. I was curious as to what it was your daddy did down there. Was he a farmer or rancher?
I run a dairy.
Run a dairy?
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you know what kind of operation you had down there?
How's that?
How his dairy operation was set up?
Oh, they milked by hand, bottled it, and delivered it up to Stephenville around the customers. I don't know whether you understand that kind of dairying or not, but that's the way they used to do it, you see. They'd take the milk and just take it out from house to house, maybe a bottle or 2 bottles, so many milk at each place.
Well, how many milking cows did they have?
Oh, he kept around 35, 40. Maybe part of the years he had a little more than that. Sometimes not quite that many. Pretty good little project.
What was it that he fed them?
Oh, he fed them mixed feed. I was rather young at that time. Don't remember too much about the feed, but I remember what he was feeding later on, for I went to milking before I could remember milking. He'd feed them so much grain and bran, short, you see. Of course, he had the grain, and then they eat lots of hay. He'd have lots of hay there for them.
Well, now, would he raise that himself, or would he
Some of it.
trade out for it?
Some he did. Now, he had a field there. He planted in oats that we'd graze them in, and we had grass pasture. And a lot of the feed he'd have to buy. He couldn't raise as much as. We had pea vines, whippoorwill peas. You don't know what a whippoorwill pea is, I don't guess, but they were stock peas. Make large running vine, make a lot of peas. A little strong to eat, but a human can exist on. When the boll weevils cleaned us out, that was my beginning to coming out here. We didn't put a cotton sack in the field first year after they hit. Now, brother, you can't imagine hardly what a jar that is. Well, we whippoorwill peas that winter. Back in those days, if you didn't have something to eat, you didn't have it much. About all you could buy, and all you would buy then was mostly just sugar, flour, and coffee. And most of the time, a lot of that time, we raised our own flour and cornbread. I've eaten more cornbread than stick at. Unusually, you don't like cornbread, I imagine, but I can still eat cornbread. I'd rather not have it for breakfast, but I'll have cornbread.
Well, do you know about when the boll weevil came to that country down there?
Yeah, about, it's during the wartime there. I would guess let me guess 18. That won't miss it very far.
Well, now they had an oil boom right about that time, too, at
The war?
Desdemona.
Yeah, I had a older brother, one was the first bunch to war there. They went up to a little town called Lipan. A fellow named Edgar Petty had a car there. He was going to take them from Lipan to Bluffdale. There's a railroad come through down there. There's half a dozen more of them. And it's telling them goodbye, and it's a sad occasion, and mothers and sweethearts crying and holding on to them. One old boy, old Jap, Seth, standing over there, he didn't have anybody taking on over him. They just kept on. Petty kept telling him, we're going to have to go. That's the same. Old Jap, he spoke up loud where they could all hear him, said, boys, hell, let's just go on and get it over with. Then we can come back home. That kind of jarred them loose. But that's first bus that went overseas. We had boys then that went in there that was dying of flu so fast. They throwed some of them in replacement. First here, and some of them got from them somewhere in France. That's where the letters come in. Mm-hmm. That's the only hearing they'd ever get. My father took the Fort Worth paper, and he'd look in that every day see the names, the wounded and the death and missing column. And through that method is the only way they have knowing anything about a missing son or death. But it was pretty bad, Mr. Mason.
Jumping back just a little bit, your father's dairy operation, was that the only dairy operation in that area, or were there?
No, there's a fellow named Jones there's two dairies there in Stephenville at the time. A fellow named Jones had one of them. They were competitors.
Mm-hmm. But other than that, there wasn't as much dairy activity as, well, for example, there is down there now.
Oh, no. Mm-hmm. Well, you see, Stephenville, Mason, it's a little hard to take you back to like it was then. And I was so young, I wish I could tell you more about it. But Stephenville had, I believe it was Kyle Academy. That was the first major school they had, which was later A&M. And at Thorpe Springs, they had a little college over there, the Church of Christ people. Let's see what is. I can't know what to call the college unless they just call it the Thorpe Springs College. It's a very popular college at the time. It was best. And they moved that into Fort Worth, which was later TCU, I believe. Things like that would be interesting. I wish I could give you dates and times and names on some of those, but I feel sure that's something you'd be interested in knowing.
Was that Adran College?
Yeah. Yeah, Adran. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, well, the Boll weevil, then, the destruction he would have wreaked on the cotton farms, and that caused a pretty good dislocation in Erath County, in that country down there.
Oh, you bet.
And as a consequence of that, your family moved a little bit north to Lipan?
No, we come from Lipan out here.
Mm-hmm.
Lipan's not very far from Stephenville. We come from Lipan out here. We got where we couldn't even get a job working. It just killed things out. I had a neighbor, two neighbors come here before. They brought big families and covered wagons. And they wound up in Lubbock. One of them dropped off down below the Cap. The other one come on to Lubbock. They have joined neighbor to us. He had a big family there in Lubbock. A fellow named John Lamb here in Wilson, over here at Union. You know about where Union is. That's where he was. He's looking for hands. He found these, and he had 400 acres of grass out there besides his cotton. That hit just right. My neighbor Richard wanted to keep his teams. They moved out and they picked all his cotton. And then he wanted to rent a place, of course, and they couldn't find one around there. Places were a little hard to get a hold of. And he told him, he said, I've got a good friend down at Wilson. That's one of the old timers here, was C.A. Coleman. He said, he's putting in some new places out here, and we might get a place from him, and did. Now that changed the whole course of events. We come to, Mr. Richard got us a place to pick cotton, a place where we'd come to stay the first fall. He come back and told us what this country was. And we come here in August in 1922, settled down over there. We had a first crop here in 23.
So really, it was a neighbor that you knew that had come out here, done a little preliminary work.
Yeah. Well, that's how things, history can come down. It's, in one way, it's interesting to me. I think this fellow Lamb, he's here, he's dead and gone now. But how that changed all of our lives, you see. When we come here then, my sister met one of the Coleman boys and married soon after we come here. Married one of the C.A. Coleman boys. Had a brother older than me that taught school. And 19, and he's either 23 or 4. Judge Doyle, the first judge over there at Leveland. Leveland was a very small place yet. And my brother had started up there with this fellow Richard. He's taken my brother up there. They come to ropes. And a fellow named Wallace was a cousin of Jim Richard. And he owned a big block of land there at ropes. Wallace, Judge Doyle, and Mr. Slaughter, all three come together. Slaughter was an old bachelor. I wish you could see him. You'd be surprised if you could have seen him. Had all gold teeth. Anyhow, this big block of land, they cut it up in 3 blocks, and Wallace took the east part. Judge Doyle got this in the middle. And Slaughter got that over on the west side, a lot of shindig sand in there. He had oil well on there, 20, 40 acres before this other fellow there even dug on it. But brother got a job teaching school out at Cloyne, a little country school that's not there anymore now, about 10 miles out south of Leveland. And at that time, there's 23 children enrolled in his school out there at Cloyne. And in Leveland, there were 17 enrolled. He had a girl took sick pneumonia and died, one of his scholars there. Was the first one buried in the Leveland cemetery. There's a baby had been born there, but they never did know, don't know yet whose baby, but it was outside of the cemetery, and they were to move it back over. I was talking about it. I don't know whether they ever did or not, but they just supposed there's some couple or someone who's coming through and lost their baby. Of course, wherever they die out on the trail that way, the only thing that was left was just bury them there. But that was beginning of Leveland. Ropes was their city then. Now they got, later on, that's where I met my wife there, Leveland. Changed my course of life. But I've seen them there more than once there on Saturday. Have to just close the store up and wait on what is in there. That'd be fall years when the cotton pickers here, let them out and turn in another bunch. Now that'd be hard for a lot of people in Leveland to believe, but I've seen that.
Mm-hmm. How'd you meet your wife?
Well, that's some story. I was working for Woolworth, South Texas. I had a good job. I was working for manager. If ever the fellow had his mind set on anything, I was going to make a Woolworth man. Now I done made the 3rd degree, got to be an assistant manager, and they thought I could play ball where I could or not, but I choked down with asthma. Man, I tell you, I thought I was going to die. I went to the doctor. They sent me to a clinic to doctors. They wound up with me and told me I'd have to come to higher country if I wanted to live. I couldn't live in a higher country, or just go out to sea and stay if I wanted to live. So that's the only chance you got. Well, that's the way I left there. And I got out here. Brother then was teaching over west of Leveland, Coverland School. Now, after I left out, I hadn't been going out of that valley very long. When brother, I began to breathe. The time I got up here, God only knows, man, how precious and wonderful it is to have good air to breathe and able to breathe it. Well, I was just making it fine. And there Monday morning, I was sitting out in front of the schoolhouse, a little bit blue, sitting there on steps. And I was wondering, you could kind of imagine maybe how my mind might have been wondering now, what am I going to do with my life? I looked up and the school bus drove up out right out in front and stopped. God, as my witness, if there's anybody besides my wife on that school bus, I didn't see them. And I got to sparking her, but by George, I had some competition. She had a boyfriend. And we had a teacher there in the school that got sick. And she was sick there 5 or 6 weeks, and they put me substitute teaching. Trustees there, I'd done met some of them, they wanted me to substitute teach. And, well, then I was making a little way with my wife. I believe it was a buck supper. And I wanted to go out and get her. She said if I beat the other boy out there, well, okay. Well, her little brother, she had a brother about 12, 13 years old in my room. And the grammar, I believe, was descriptive for being brought up. And I had it in mind before I ever got to put, oh man, he wanting to talk. I'd let him stand up, you know, and just talk, tell about this or that, describe this and that. Put, he just kept jumping. Oh man, he wanted to call on him. Directly I called on him. He jumped up, you know, I'd stand up to recite. I said, Bud, I want you the best you possibly can, just in your own mind. Think of it that you've never seen me. I'm a perfect stranger, and I just ride up talking to you and ask you whereabouts you live. Just see if you could tell me how to get out to your house. Brother, that got me out there. So, the rest of it, well, I showed you the picture there a while ago.
But now, when you first came out, I guess in 1922, what was this land like? Was it all grassland? Was any of it broken out?
Well, they had what they call a post settlement down this side of Post, C.W. Post. Old timer was settled Post, and that post named after him. And he was quite some man. I wish I could have known him personally. But he put in a bunch of land up on the Cap Rock, nice places and improvements on all the post settlements. And he'd sell it to these people, you know, on time. And give a real setup. But that comes all less than halfway from here to Post. Some of it, I believe, come out of Garza County, but maybe over to Lynn County. I'm not sure about that.
I think at where my granddad lived, I think that was the furthest west. That was the last.
That's close to Garza and Lynn County line, wasn't it? All right. Then after you got over here, the places were far apart, and there were not such good houses no more. Maybe a good house now and then some early settler was in. But they had a lot of box houses. Sand would come through some of them. Some of it just all stopped, had to scoop sand out after a big sandstorm. And then you left here then. By the way, I'll tell you something else about the city of Wilson I left out a while ago. Tech College come down there locating here.
Really?
That's right.
What's the story on that?
Well, they wanted to build a college way out west, and they hadn't particularly figured on just putting it in any big town. It wasn't too big towns here. And there's a volume of people, I don't know how many cars, see me like 40, 50 cars of them. They come through and stopped, and they liked it here. And if we would have got Tech College out the other side of Wilson there, I believe that was 24 maybe. But Lubbock offered them a better deal. But when they put it up there, it wasn't in Lubbock. Just one street went out to it.
Mm-hmm. You remember the day all those cars showed up from the locating board?
The day?
Yeah.
No, I don't. I wish I did.
I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is, do you recall seeing them drive up? Did you witness that?
Oh yeah, it's a big time in Wilson when folks like that come. We didn't get to see a lot of people. We'd go up when we could, when the train come through in the morning, see if there's any immigrant cars in. That's where the first people. You know what an immigrant car is?
Well, I know, but why don't you go ahead and tell me?
Well, it's just a box car. You put maybe household goods, furniture in one end, and stock in the other side. Of course, there'd have to somebody come on the train, but that's what we call immigrant cars. I've seen as many as 3 at one time come in, and then it's certainly interesting to get over there and meet them, see who they were, where they're moving to. They'd be moving in around here somewhere. But I've seen many of them come in like that.
That's pretty interesting how this country settled up that way. You know, everyone that came here came from somewhere else.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's right. There's some of them made out of pretty tough stuff, Mason. Fellow W.H. Mays, he's a big rancher, he and his folks all gone now. They were first at Floyd Ado. He had sheep over there. And his wife, he bought Holden. He's over here about 2 or 3 miles across there where his ranch begins, there and on down into Oka Lake. She drove those sheep by herself afoot from Floyd Ado and across that canyon with him. But I imagine Mr. May was right there every once in a while. But she bought that sheep. They first had sheep when they come in. Later, cattle. May, Lumsden, and the Colemans were 3 of the first settlers. And I can remember so many things stands out in my mind that just tickled the hound out of me. I still like to hear old timers talk. I was there one day and these 3 were together. And they was laughing, they was telling about being on, about the first grand jury, about the first court. They was called down on the grand jury in the early days right then. They called the name, old George somebody had turned his neighbor in for getting his cow chips. He'd come a little damp spell, and I'd eat them in a meal, cooked cow chips. They'd get out and turn those chips over, and let them dry till after dinner, and then get the wagon team, go back and pick them up. And the neighbor had got his cow chips, and he's trying to bill him, and they told him, they just looked the laws over, everything they knew about law, and they couldn't find in there where it's against the law to pick up cow chips. How mad this fellow got. Now, they were so sincere, and I wish you could have heard that conversation I had there. He tore up the courthouse now when he found out they wasn't going to bill him. I told him there just wasn't no law against picking up cow chips. They make a very hot fire, and I'd eat them in a meal. Some of them talk about women making up flour and picking up cow chips and throwing in the fire and dust the hand off and come back and get in the flour dough. I tell them some of them are a little nicer than that. I tell you what most of the women had, they had a little sharp stick. They'd pluck it like that, Cow chips stood up a little better then than they do now. And that's where they put fuel in the stove. And most of it was Bachelor stove. You know what a Bachelor stove is? They have 2, some of them 4 plates on them down here. Lids you take on and off to cook over. And then in this stovepipe, there's an oven. Where the stovepipe come out back here, there'd be an oven. That's where you cook your bread and bake and that. That's what we call Bachelor stoves. And that's what we had when we first come.
Use those cow chips instead of, gas or coal?
Well, cow chips instead of buying fuel, and we're putting a lot of land in, and these mesquites here, they've got a lot of wood on the root. Did you know that?
I've heard about it.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't dug any up, though.
You take a little mesquite tree, bush, may not be over yay high, maybe have a root big and larger than my arm. Big tap roots, and make a very good fuel. We try them out, burn them with cow chips.
Well, now, was there a lot of mesquite out here on this open grassland?
Not as much as they were later, but there's quite a lot. There's quite a bit of grubbing and putting in a piece of land. You'd find maybe a quarter section. One side would be pretty heavy grubs, maybe run out of the way, and then the rest of it may be grubs would be sort of scattering over. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of history being made then, Mr. Mason. I wish you knew about these old timers. I've listened to them and I knew well. They were getting in trouble here over the boundaries of their land, and they got together and agreed on a fixed point down below the Cap Rock, and then survey that off from this fixed point, come back through and take a section of land more or less. So all the deeds in this land at one time was more or less, 160 acres more or less, or 320 or 640 more or less. Mm-hmm. And that settled this here. You know where Slide is? Mm-hmm. You know how it got its name? Mm-hmm. They got in the same trouble over there, but they were a mile off. And they slid over a mile. That's where Slide, Texas got its name. It slid over a mile to correct their surveys.
You said that later on mesquite became more prevalent than it was early on. Why do you suppose that was, or that is?
I wished I knew. It's sort of that's a good question. But they just did. I don't know whether it's because they were grazed more, or when we began to settle made a difference and we had more cows. Horses, you see, horses, cows both, they'd eat those mesquite beans, scout them out that way, or how come I just wouldn't know. In McGinn, the country was pretty thinly settled. But even back before my time, there's far less mesquites then than there was when I come. That's what tell me that I've got to go by. Hearsay, of course.
That was the next question I was curious about. When did mesquite begin to multiply?
Well, I'd say it's in the 20s, maybe 19s, 18s, or 20s.
See, for part of the 20s, you were down south working for Woolworths. Is that?
Yeah, I was down there about a year.
When you came back to this country, what did you do to make a living?
Put in a grocery store. Bought cream and eggs. And there's times there I didn't have any money at all. I just had cream and eggs. I had a contract with Swift and Company out of Lubbock for cream and eggs. I was buying for Swift. I had a little old truck. I take cream and eggs up there on Saturday night after I closed up. Sometime it'd be 10 o'clock. Before I get closed up, take up there, get money to operate on for the week on. Or there's some money, but by far most of my customers would bring in cream and eggs. And I've had some of them there, I owed them more money than I could pay them. They're just cream and eggs, try and cash out. I'd give a cent or two more on credit than I did where they took cash, you see, try to use my trade. You ever test cream, know what buying cream is like?
Well, it seems when I was young I had some.
I had an electric motor to run that, which some of them didn't have. Some of them had to still crank by hand. Those little long neck bottles with figures on them, you know what that is, do you or not? Or there'd be a bottle on the bottom down in here, it'd all glass, and then have a neck run up like this. And figures from 1 to 50, you might say. I believe that's where mine read off like into that. You put cream, you stir up cream like you get a 5-10 gallon can of cream, stir it up good and get a small sample of it, pour down into this bottle up all 3/4 of the way down here or more, then fill it on up to the neck, and it had acid, sulfuric acid I believe they call it, but acid had measured that out, put that in there, and I whirl it around a while, stop it, then I put water and run water on up to the top. Then I'd put it back in there and whirl. God, you know, they just ran like that. They'd sling out like that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
When it come out, the butterfat would be all run up in this neck, and I'd measure it. Oh, I had dividers there. Maybe it'd be 32, 38, 43. See, measure the cream down here, whatever cream I had, and then it come up in the figures. That's where I bought it by the butterfat. Give so much a pound for butterfat. Eggs, some of them we had to kennel. Fertile, there's too many fertile eggs, but I done that till, I guess 38.
Candle, when you hold them up to the candle, if they're fertile, what do you see?
Oh, you're just dark and light, throw a light through here and put an egg in there and you can see through it pretty good. And of course the fertile eggs is good to eat, but they'd go to bed a whole lot quicker. And if you look through there, you might see a little blood streaks or something come through there. That'd be a fertile egg, you see, that wasn't good. Can't cut that out. And it wasn't as big to tell for sure where an egg was. Like a fresh egg, you could tell where it's fertile or not, fertile and infertile. But some of them, they'd save chicken feed, you know, by not having roosters, but selling infertile eggs, and buy the chicks, had incubators, they'd raise their own chicks. And I bought lots of eggs, man. Eggs and cream both. I bought thousands of gallons of cream. I suppose taste of every sample, but man, I couldn't do that. Some of the nicest family, you couldn't tell sometimes. You might get a French harp. Top, you couldn't tell sometimes what you might get out. Some kid dropped in the cream. I've had it all.
When did milk and eggs, when did the local farm families, etc., begin raising eggs or producing eggs and milk? Was that, were they doing that in the 1920s, or was that something that occurred later?
This was in the 30s, through the Depression years. Roosevelt come in 34, I guess. That was after the big Depression. It's still on. The 29, the Depression then was something awful. We couldn't go through with it no more now. There'd be too much bloodshed. But when Roosevelt come in, he declared a bank holiday. Closed up the bank. They said he couldn't do it, but he did. And I don't know how many days, best I can remember, 3, 4 days or something. He opened them up, you see, we had guarantee of deposits and so on. And things began to get better, and much better for some time there, but some of them would take that up right quick, you know. That was the beginning of handout. But of all this free good stuff that's going on now, the intention was good in the beginning. But they run them into the ground. You take like child labor laws. You know, there was a time that if you was working in a factory, as soon as your children got big enough to go to school, they'd have to work in a factory to help keep the living going. So they made it a law. See, that was the beginning of the child labor law. They got that passed on out here that we couldn't hire these Mexicans pick cotton in the fall. That maybe violating some federal law, they'd come out and they'd search for them. It wasn't all fun. The good old days weren't all good, Mr. Mason. I'll guarantee you, we like to think of them sometimes as good old days. Fellow takes pneumonia, have to wait till the 9th day to know whether there's a chance for him to live. The 9th day they'd face the crisis. They'd go to getting better, or else they'd flunk out. That's pneumonia. Guitar. You never heard of guitar, but that is sinus trouble.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah.
Okay, I've seen it all the time, the word, but I never understood what it was.
I've been in kids, their heads just rotting off in school. You couldn't always sit by one of them, their breath would be so foul. And how they suffered with that sinus, they didn't know what it was. That's the biggest step we've got in medical science for us, help for us. I wouldn't be here. There wouldn't been no strength left in me if it hadn't been for some of the newer doctors.
Mm-hmm. It's really an amazing thing, all that has happened in the world of medicine.
I've got a friend, two of the med doctors. Some of them can just scare the poops out of you. When they go talking about trying to breed up a superhuman. You see, Germany thought they was going to breed them up a superhuman. Do you know anything about breeding feed and such as that?
Mm-hmm.
Some idea? Well, it's bigger than all out of doors. Genetics is so big that I wouldn't try to go into it. But they're liable to come out of more idiots or beast or something. And whatnot. I'm a Christian. May not act like one, talk like one. If I haven't, I'm sorry for it, but I've got a great God and an all-loving God, and I know that He loves me, and I'm not afraid of Him changing up too much, but I don't like for Him to fool with a human life. And that's what some of them want to do. Of course, now that's off the record, but just talking to some of these young chaps, they're so ambitious, some of them would go ahead for it, I think. I'm not for it. But I'm not a radical on my belief on it by any means. What do you think about it?
Oh, well, I don't know. They probably shouldn't tamper too much with the natural order of things.
Well, you're a youngster, you see, and I'm from the old school. I got a boy, he majored in economy, economics to begin with, and then he took his Bachelor in business. But he would go for the idea, you know, that the more you spend and all you could spend, and you keep the wheels really rolling and not invent something that would be permanent. Well, mine, we wanted to build something or get something, try to have it permanent. We could be, and try not to buy anything you couldn't pay for. Quite a difference.
Okay, I'm interested in hearing more about the milk and egg operation, especially since you were, well, a person that would purchase these eggs and milk from the farmers.
Yes, sir.
Okay, I was interested in that whole economy, how that worked. Because the only part I've heard about it so far is, the part of the farmer going to sell the milk. And I don't know around here what stores they would have gone to sell it, when this would have taken place, etc. And also who the people were in Lubbock. Was it just Swift, or was there another operation up there too?
Well, there was another operation. A fellow named Dick White had a big poultry house. He bought cream and eggs, but he wasn't strong enough to be too much a competitor against Swift. Swift was strong those days. I bought chickens, turkeys, live weight, I had a house out the back. Had contracts where I could buy them.
Well, now, where was that Swift dairy located?
It is Swift poultry and cream and egg butter is, at that time you go out on that road towards Plainview, I guess it is across that first viaduct or somewhere there over to the left. Nearly anybody in Lubbock that's been there very long could spot you right on the, where Swift was.
And it was once a week that you would go up there.
Yes, sir. On Saturday nights, after I closed my store on Saturday night, I had a truck, and I had 10-gallon cream cans that Swift would furnish me. I'd buy this cream, sometime 5 gallons, some of them gallons. I've bought it out of syrup buckets. Weigh it, but I'd pour it in these 10-gallon cans. And I had crates of eggs. You know what a big crate is? 30 dozen. That's where I crated my eggs. Take them up there, and they'd give me my money. I didn't try to make money off of them. I tried to use it for exchange to see where I could stand business. And I didn't get rich. I didn't have anything when I started. I didn't have anything on when I quit, but I lived. That's where I started my family. I began to see I needed to get out of town with them. I liked to land it in Mexico instead of here. The old man and that lady out south, out west of Portales hadn't been in the hospital. My family had been out there. The children were all small. Neighbor friend of mine. Now we went out there to shop around. That we heard that cheap land over there. Land had done jumped up to $50 to $60, $70 acre around here. Before I left, I knew the place I'm on here was for sale for $65. Well, I found several places out there for $30 an acre with a house on them. But I went on up northwest and south of, I forget that name over there in Mexico. 35, 40 miles northwest from Portales. A big school district there. I believe they call that the Boll School District, biggest school district in the United States at that time. And there's a section of land there, Mr. Mason, I could have bought for $15 an acre. As good a land as you ever. Well, it is so far out there. My neighbor had a friend up there that lived out there. We stayed all night with. This old man and lady's in the hospital, and I couldn't see him that afternoon. I was going to go the next day and take this. Land agents was showing us around. And we had to wait till way after dark there. They were looking for school bus flights to take the kids off of. I mean, it was way after dark. And they got up the next morning like we were fixing to get up and make a trip, way before daylight, looking for school lights to put the kids back on. And I didn't want to take my kids out there, and I knew about this place. And I come home, and we got here about 2 o'clock, I guess, before I got home. I told my wife that's what I found. And we come over here, she'd got a drink of water and took some of this water over to the place there before, and I tried it. And the water where we were hard. You tried to wash the kids' hair in it, it'd get buttermilky, You couldn't cook beans. This over here, she could just wash their hair so good and cook these beans good. And on account of the water, that's what sold this place. She said, honey, let's take it.
When did y'all purchase this?
I got this in 1945.
Okay, back in your grocery operation, what years did this egg and milk traffic peak in? Was it real prevalent later in the 30s, or What kind of time frame are we looking at?
Mr. Mason, it didn't happen over at night at all, but what changed the complexion of everything when tractors started coming in. At first, some of them wouldn't take the tractors, some did. Now, I saw my first tractor, I guess it was in 24, a little fortune, breaking land with it. And Dean, I done told Dean I'd love it for 500 years. I heard him make one of the most intelligent give us on a short course we had there on the farming operation and advising us to keep our mules and horses self-sufficient, grow our own gas, advising against tractors.
This was an educator?
Yeah, he was Dean, hey.
At the tech?
Yeah, he was there for 100 years. Dean, Single.
Sure.
Dean Single. He's the one who made that him. I went home well satisfied and thinking what a smart man I'd listened to. But he was just as wrong as he could be. You see, that's staying innocent to life. My family I showed you, the first children I had born, first child, the doctor advised me to keep my wife in bed 2 weeks if I was, you might say, financially able, could manage it, you know, that it'd be so much better, we'd both appreciate it later. To keep her in bed for 2 weeks. Well, when my last baby was born, up there at Lubbock, I took her up there about 8:30 one night, and the baby was born about 9:30. And I went back up there the next day, and but they didn't have my wife out there running up and down the hall. I like to faint it. Well, she got back on into the room after I got there, and then I was going to get the head nurse. I was going to let them know what I thought about what was going on there. And I went to her room, and she caught hold of my hand and showed me what a grip she had. In other words, now she's telling me this is all right. She said at that time she would have been very weak. She'd been kept in bed, but she's already getting her strength. Mm-hmm. So I don't know whether we headed the Indians or not. My father and uncle there, when I was telling you about them being in Arizona, they had a lot of Indians there. Indians go up into the mountains there in the summer, come back down to the valley in the winter. That throwed them going back and forth part of the time. My father was riding out there one day and saw an Indian squaw. She rode up on a horse, and she was very heavy, pregnant. And they held for a little powwow. She didn't get off the horse. I rather they'd got down there, and then she got off. She roped her horse, went on ahead. My father knew where the spring of water over there, 2 or 3 or 4 miles up from where they were. And about 2 or 3 o'clock, he run on to them again. They'd passed the spring, and this squaw had a papoose buckled on her. And I told my doctor about that as my first child there. Well, he said, of course, we don't know about those things, even though that all be a true story. Said I wouldn't want to question it yet, but said there's no record whatever that is good for them. The same doctor's one that had her running up down the hall when the last baby was born. There's been a big change. You just can't imagine, Harley, what a change has come. If the next, see, I've been here, it'll be 62 years this August. But if there was anything like a big change in the next 62 years, is where the past 62, you see, my father lived to the early 30s, and he wouldn't know where he was if he's here now. Well, we wouldn't know where we were. I don't know where the end is. What do you think on it? Do you think?
Mm-hmm. Well, You know, one thing that's interesting about the time period that y'all have lived in, and well, really your father, is that people got real ingenious about inventing little bitty machines that you could use in your home. And it was that the average person could afford these. And that was a big revolutionary type of thing in the 20s, and so that changed the way people lived. And then, of course, afterwards, why mobility, the automobile, changed things even more. I think the type of change we'll see in the future has to do with electronics and TV and communications, and that we'll make a big leap that way.
Well, it could be. Now, we were modern in one way, but the first telephones we had, my aunt run switchboard, little country phones around out there, you know, and if you phoned central, you had to go switchboard, rang her, and then she'd call out for you.
Yeah.
And now then, I can sit right here in my own house and dial anywhere, I guess, in the world, anywhere in the United States.
Mm-hmm. Well, like my granddad's part, he was, you know, he grew up when you used animals to farm. He had mules and then later horses, things like that. Well, during the 30s, things changed pretty rapidly.
That's what I was talking about a while ago, is changing from horses to tractors.
Okay, first of all, those animals were eventually replaced by tractors. Secondly, they began to come up with alternative power sources, energy on the farm.
Yeah.
You know, they had these carbide lamps that would give them light at night. Well, then in a few years' time, they had a wind charger.
Yeah.
This would provide electricity.
I had that.
They could charge up a battery, and then what they used it for on my granddad's farm was for incubating these eggs that they would sell or, well, trade. But then once they got that, see, they could get a radio too.
That's right. I'm living with you.
Well, then a short period after that, by the early 1940s, they had electricity actually come in with these power lines. So within about a 15-year period, the lifestyle that my granddad lived just took quantum leaps forward. It changed more in that 15 years than it's changed almost since then. You know, take my father, for example. Okay, after he's gotten out of college, you know, he bought a house, but then he got a car. Well, over the years, he might have gotten one car or, you know, trade that in for another car, etc. Got him another house, but essentially he's living the same standard, you know, with electricity.
That's your granddaddy?
This is my dad I'm talking about.
Oh, I see.
As he was 30 years ago, you know, and okay, he's living in 1982, pretty much he has all the conveniences that he had in 1950. They've refined them a lot more, and they're flashier, and they're more expensive, but essentially they're not that much different. And my granddad, between 1928 and 1940, the types of things he had available to him, from switch from horses and mules to tractors, switch from kerosene lamps, you know, to electricity. Wow, that was a pretty radical change.
You better believe it, brother. I lived through it all. Kerosene lamps right on down to the electricity. And we lived with a big line. We never could get on it till the rural electrification come in. Johnson, first president, proved to me I wasn't altogether a Democrat that I thought it was. But he's the first one that stood foremost and up that got the electric currents to us first. We got that in, you know. I had a little house over here then. And I had 4 lights. That's all I had to begin with. The kids was in school. My boy, he's next to the baby. He's up 4 or 5. And the day we got it in, well, I had one breaker cut off all the lights. I had turned everything on. And then I went to the breaker and cut them off. And I hadn't thought about that little scamp, no one to tell him, but he told them when the kids come in from school, said, we got sunshine in the house. No, man, they jumped and went flopping, turning on lights. Of course, there wasn't anything burned. I didn't let on. Went on, we got to work all done up after. Had our kerosene lamps lit up. My wife got supper ready. We sat down to eat. I used out and pushed the big breaker on and lit the whole house up. You never heard such screaming and hollering and jumping in your life. And that's all we had in the beginning. Then we got an electric iron. One of these, you handle on it, you know, you press that away. It got, now with electricity go off, we couldn't live very long there. We water, lights, and everything we depend on.
That's right. This milk and egg economy that occurred. Well, I'm real interested in that because once my granddad got the incubator, well, that put them in business. And it seems like they'd come up with their spending money during the Depression by selling milk, cream,
That's
and
right.
eggs.
Your granddad, that's the way he raised them.
So I wanted to find out as much about that as I could.
That old booger, you may not know it, but everybody thought he was a poor man. After he passed away, they found out he owned about half Boll city. You know more about that, I guess, than I do. Sure. You don't remember him much?
No, I sure don't.
I wish you could have known him. He was one of the yesterday boys. Quite a talker and interesting. I could just sit all day and listen to him talk. Lee and Tom, they don't have to take back seat on the talking. They talk pretty good too. Do you know the boys, Jack, Tom's boys?
You bet, yeah.
Lonnie, you call Lonnie's name. Jack and my boy were very close friends, just like that, all through their schools.
Jack's in Albuquerque now.
Yeah.
Works up there for the Bureau of Indian Affairs.
My boys with Pfizer Chemical Company. Had him in Dallas and at Colorado, Denver, then back to Lubbock a while, and then New York City. And he's finished his time up there. However, he seemed to like it. He's Wichita, Kansas now. And Lubbock, his district run down as far as Lubbock now. He's in Amarillo now. I'm going to get to see him Friday. He's going to run out. He and Jack and 3 or 4 other boys, they had a band there in college. Esquires. The little bookers, they made some money off of it. I never did go too strong for it, but I just figured this way. My wife and I talked it over. There could be other things that'd be worse. But they went to Amarillo as far as Albuquerque this time to play for dances, and that didn't suit me too good, but there could be things worse than that, so we kept quiet.
Okay, on this milk and egg economy, what other stores in this area
Well,
take in that cream?
You'd have to draw on your imagination. There's one grocery store up here now, and then there's 5. And we all bought cream and eggs. And that's the biggest way they got by. Farmers couldn't have got by then. If he did, I wouldn't know how. I wouldn't know how he got by. The banks, then they wouldn't loan you money till they had to. And they'd loan you money in the spring of the year and say you're going to get $400. That is some of money for some of them. They'd let you have that maybe to get the land up and all, and then come around after a while, or they'd let you have another 100 to plant and start the cultivation, and that's 2, and maybe let you have the third 100 then. Maybe you could lay by on that, but still need some money to go on. It's just on how the crops are looking, where you got that up. Things was hard, tight on. And the schools, a lot of them had to take, I believe they called them vouchers, to get some state money in. Some of the fellows had a little money. You see, they'd discount those vouchers and cash them. They'd make money off these teachers. Just cashing the vouchers for them. But banks They just didn't put it out. I was on school board up here. And then, when we depended on state aid, we had to take a pauper's oath to get state aid to run a school with. There'd be so much money appropriated for books and for education and this and that. And the school was subject for inspection all the time. Of course, you wouldn't know when it was coming to see if you're spending the money right. If you had too much money left over, they'd cut your appropriation down. It sounded a little bit crooked, but sometime we'd hide a little money to keep from getting appropriation cut off. Then the Gilbert and Aiken bill come along. And that sounded like heaven to me. Now, this is the modern stuff all the way through on every progressive mode. And they're going to have this and that for us and wouldn't increase our taxes. Man, did we pull and work for that, which it was good, all right. But they didn't tell us in that if we maintained the school, we'd have to raise our own taxes here. So that on now then, to taxes never kill you. My taxes on this place was $47 when I bought it. And mine's over $500 and fixing to go again. That's a school tax.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not like some school taxes. But that's just how school taxes gone up since I bought this place. I didn't know it till they assessed this place here, but I got the best farm in Wayne County. According to where they valued it from the school. Old Tommy Mason, he was on the board up there. And I met the school board, the board of equalization there.
Mm-hmm.
And he was on the county board. Some old Tom, I didn't know shit ass was going to be up there. He's sitting over there on the side of the table, set me on, had his boots on up on the table there, back that. They called me, you know, it's my time. I come on, sat down. Old Tom sitting over there, and the school board member. Of course, that is so full of them. I had several complaints I wanted to put in, see why about. Old Tom started them off, said, all right, Harry, that if you want to go to hell for lying, so just get started. That knocked it all out of me. I didn't get anywhere. You could go up and raise Dickens room and it wouldn't do any good.
Yeah, I think Tom will be happy when his time's up on that board there.
Oh, yeah. But he's been a great public service for us all the way through. He's got lots of friends all over. And he's done a lot of traveling. You know about that, don't you? Mm-hmm. Okay. Are you married?
Yeah, I just got married last summer.
Well, I just hope you have lots of luck in it.
It's been real nice so far. I tried to wait a long time. A lot of my contemporaries got married at an earlier age than I did, but and I wasn't necessarily looking to get married, except
It's when you got married, you know what an old bachelor is, don't you? That's a man that has thought of marrying. You had time to think, and then went ahead and married, didn't you?
Yeah.
That's all right.
Now, she's a pretty good girl, so I figured if I pass this one.
It's wonderful. You know, I talk about having to readjust myself. And a family of boys, I was raised up with 8 brothers. You can sort of imagine some of that. And then I never thought of a wife, and I talked it over before we married. We wanted to have 3 or 4 children. We loved children. And I wasn't only expecting all boys, but wanted to be twins or triplets. And come up to a house full of girls. Man, I lived in the girls' world here for about 40 years. Lost my wife and my children all married, gone. I'm here alone. And I'm not trying to ask for any sympathy. Don't forget any of that. For I would sympathize myself if you'd let me. But my wife had lots more sense than I had, and during this time that she's going through waiting to die, well, she made me promise her that I would keep living, so I wouldn't stop because she was gone. And I finally promised her. That was a hard deal for me, for I never thought, you see, I was several years older, but what I'd go before she would. Now she's gone, I was here by myself. I just thought this time I just couldn't stand it. But then it come on to now that I was telling you a while ago about the Meals on Wheels, and 42, well, that's singles mostly, some married couples. But now then, I'm getting where I enjoy living some. I go up to Gin, Co-op Gin every morning. I'm there at 7 o'clock every morning. That's when they open. They got free coffee for any and everybody. And there's about 75% Dutchmans, some Polacks, some Czechs, a few whites. And we have the grandest time up there you can think of, for about a couple of hours. They'll drift on off, go back to work. But now any time you want to know something, come down there early some morning and just sit through with it. You'll find it out. They'll take it all up.
Mm-hmm.
Were you ever around Germans or that kind of people much?
Mm-hmm. A little bit.
They're good citizens, good people. Some of them thinks of them as Hitlerites. They all come over here because they wanted to come. They love this country. Some of them still love their father country or mother country, but different than what some people thinks for. I knew a lot of those first old Germans. Some of them come from Germany. Bless their heart, I tell you what they did do. They'd make their children talk English. Where they'd have them ready for school. And that's something these Mexicans not trying to do. They want to change everything. I don't go for it too strong, but they breed faster than we do. Come down here one time, took charge of a school board. They weren't satisfied about discipline that the high school teachers doing here. Some Mexican boy up there. They set up guards at the door, moved the school board from one place to another, set up guards at every door. That's right here in the United States of America, in Wilson, Texas. That just made my blood boil. Of course, I wasn't there. But school board, they kept their cool. They had the Channel 28 down here to take any fight up. They wanted to get a fight, and get locked up. And they get up there and they get to jabbering in Spanish. About half the school boards were German, and they'd go talking in German. That just baffled the hound out of them.
I bet it did.
But it cooled down, and there was nothing come of it. But you take now some of the Germans, there's two Lutheran churches, St. Paul and St. John. And one of them, what we call the Missourian Lutherans. Friend just want bullshit. Well, I hope you haven't got that on.
I just turned it on. It takes a few seconds to warm
I
up.
keep forgetting about that.
Okay, I've got some names here. I just thought you ever know any Bridges? Bridges?
Knew of them. I wasn't acquainted, especially Bridges.
Oh, it's Miss Brookshire, but she died in 1934. Did you know Dan Carpenter?
Yes, sir, I sure did. Good friend of mine.
Can you tell me a little bit about him?
Well, mostly what I can tell you about him, I believe, was down here about Newland. Then he went over here on T-bar land out from Tahoka. And I've served on the grand jury with him a number of times, but he was an outstanding citizen, very good man. Now, anything personal much about his life, I couldn't tell you much on that.
Does he have any kin living? kinfolk?
Yeah,
They live in Tahoka?
I think so.
Okay, the Chapman Ranch, was that a variety of cottonseed?
Yeah,
Was Bagby a type of
yeah.
cottonseed? Joe used to burn coal before he had kerosene.
Yes, sir.
Do you know where that coal came from?
Well, I believe there's still some of that Thurber coal come in here, but I believe it's from Colorado. Most of it there's soft coal and hard coal. The soft coal cost more, but the hard coal had a lot of slack in it, you know. But I believe maybe Colorado. They brought it in here from out there somewhere.
By train?
Yeah, carload lots. I've helped unload. I've seen a many loads of it unloaded there.
Mm-hmm. Well, they just unloaded in town, then each individual family would go up and buy some?
Yeah, by the lumber yards. We had 2 lumber yards. They each handled coal. Just go there and get you a ton or 2 ton. You see, the cow chips and grubs come before the coal, and then the coal come before the kerosene. But then later we started getting uptown. I had me what's called a firefly heater that I burnt kerosene in. It's heat up pretty good.
Is that an Aladdin lamp?
Yeah. Our first light, we had a kitchen light we put up here with a reflector on it and kerosene, you know. And then some of them I didn't have that, had carbide. That light up still make good lights as far as that's concerned. But they're gone since we got electricity. They don't use them anymore. But some of these German people, they had nicer homes, you know, a little more money than I had.
Mm.
So they had, I remember, carbide lights.
Did you know O.R. Cook?
Lived down towards Grassland here. Raised a big family down there, yes, sir.
Can you tell me a little bit about him?
Well, he had a big family. The family was all outstanding so far as I know. I think there's still one of them down there. There's one of them that made a doctor. And there's one of the Cook girls married a boy that had a 165-acre ranch in Arizona. And his daughter and my girl were chums and roommates in that college. But they were great people, but above both of them every day. I didn't do that, but I knew them all, and they were outstanding people. And a big family of them.
Okay, Brother Coppage. He was a Methodist preacher on the
Who?
Brother Coppage on
Yeah.
the Southland Circuit.
Yeah.
Let's see, Harold Davis.
Davis?
Yeah.
Harold? I know several Davises. I don't call to mind which one might be Harold.
Do you know P. Hughes? P. Hughes? Just P, like the initial P,
No,
and then Hughes. So.
no, I knew turnip greens, but I didn't know them peas. I thought that turnip green was the strangest name I'd ever run on to.
Really?
Really?
Around here?
Yeah, lived to Tahoka.
T.E. Fortune.
Who?
T.E. Fortune?
I know of them.
Let's see, Woodrow Furr.
Fur? No.
Do you know Peter Gerner?
Knew of him.
Do you know any Gollyhans?
No, sir.
Ed L. Gossett? Some of these people, if they got descendants living, I thought I'd go visit. Sam Hawthorne.
Yeah, I know some of them. They're out of Tahoka. We've done business with one of them. I worked some, help out, I'd call it flunk it to sound a little more dignified, say work as a human relations, for instance. Airplanes come in, and spray for insects and defoliation of cotton. I could be classed as a commercial checker. I could check insects pretty good out in the cotton fields or grain field, know what's beneficial and what's harmful, balancing against one another, to see which one's gaining, to know where to pause and so on. But that's something you don't want to fool with unless you have to, for if you start it, you go to killing your beneficials out. If it wasn't for beneficials, we couldn't live very long, Brother Mason. That's God's balance of nature. But sometimes it gets out of balance, and if you go to poison, you want to have it timed right. You didn't. I could take you in a feel of that, but let's just go on.
Okay. Well, some other time I'd like to come down and walk around in the field with you and have you point them out. But
I don't know the technical names on many of them. I just know what we call them.
here's P. Hughes. Buford Jones.
Buford Jones was a very good friend of mine. Yes, sir. You bet you.
Was he from around here, or did
Yes, sir. Do you know where Gordon is over there? He owned a place in south of Gordon. Lived there, and he part of the time he run race horses out at Dotha. Had some of the better horses over there. He made a lot of money. He had a boy. I forget the name of the boy. I liked the boy, but he could have been a playboy. See, what was his name? I thought a lot of it. Anyhow, I knew Buford well, knew his wife's family. And the other Jones, he had a brother named Bob. Bob and I were a good friend. Bob was Buford's brother. Buford, he used to work lots of niggers down there, way back there in the 20s. He had to kill one of them out there. And that sort of disturbed things for a while. But
what happened?
I think that having a supper, you may not know what a nigger supper is. On Saturday night sometime, they'd have suppers out. They'd get in. Some of them big niggers go to getting drunk. Of course, I guess there's gambling. I never was around suppers much. A little too rough, but I'm sure it's in self-defense. Buford wasn't no killer.
Did they, okay, I guess now we have Mexicans as migrant labor. Now, back in the 20s, were black people, were they the...
We had lots of black people to begin with. A fellow named Harlan out west of Slayton. That's the very early 20s there, maybe 19, later teen. Brought the first niggers out here, and they had to protect them. He and the boys, he had a bunch of boys, and they all had guns and knew how to use them. They had a time, but they kept that first bunch of niggers, and after then, well, quite a few niggers come, and my brother and I, we used niggers not all together and picking cotton. And to begin with, we'd have to wait for them and keep their books and everything, but every time you take a bale of cotton to town, well, one of them wants to get him 4 cents worth of bologna, and a nickel box of crackers, and a nickel's worth of onions, and a little of this and that, and you had to just keep that all down. And payday comes Saturday, each one of them you had a different weight and settled and paying for him. You didn't hold out on what you'd brought out for him. Well, you just never got it, that is all. Then it went from there to where there'd be a crew boss, You could settle for him, he'd settle for hands. The Mexicans, they come sort of the same way. Then it got where the trucks had trucks after a while. They'd bring a truckload in and locate them, and you could pay the head man. He was the boss, and he'd settle the crew. I think he took out more than fair wages sometimes, just his hands, but I never felt guilty on that. That was them for that. He'd take them down the truck up, maybe a Lubbock over weekends. But you just had to settle for one fellow that way. And then they got where there's two independent for us after a while. We'd get them down here and they'd go to Lubbock or Slayton on Saturday to Oakland. Somebody always offered them more money. More money, you know, somebody raised their wages. We wouldn't know whether it was or wouldn't. A lot of time it'd be true, lose our hands. And finally, come on, we got our cotton got cheap. We made our first cotton machine ourselves to gather cotton with. We built us a big box, had the front end, left it open. Got these fence palings, drove them down out in front like that, you know, and run the cotton up between there and stand there for rake to keep that. That's where we gathered the first cotton, and it come on to, we made a box, and 2x4s run up this way from the end down here and straddle a row. Mm-hmm. And of course we'd have 2x6s here, but we'd get those cotton bands they tied cotton with, strip across the top. And we'd use that, you know, and we'd keep it just a little bit wider back here than it would be in front, where if anything come through down here, it'd have room come through here and it'd fall off on each side. Of course, it's still quite a bit of raking back, but we could do a cleaner job.
There's a cotton sled?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And John Deere put out a one-row machine first, and it'd hold it up in a box. But then after we got out of it, we had to use a fox, pitch it up the wagon. Then we on our own got where we'd hitch two of them together. Had a two-row, you know. That come on to where we are now. They got big machines now. Cost lots of money. It costs so much money now, it just scares me to think about trying to farm. I don't believe I could stand the pressure anymore.
Mm-hmm. Did they have any migrant white families that would come through and pick cotton in the fall?
Very, very few. Most of the white families would be singles that come and would board them. Brother and I, we'd done quite a bit of that on the beginning. We were batching. We lost our mother when we were, the last was rather small. And brother, I was talking about coming out here with me on the wagon. And friends from back there had come, and we'd just board them. And they'd pick cotton for us. And later on, the families, there'd be some families come, you know, like we come the first year to pull cotton, but that tipped off then to it was mostly niggers and Mexicans. And it come from that to machine age. Machine age passed on to it. One of these modern machines now costs you $4, $5, up to $8, $10,000. Some of these farmers' masons got over $100,000 worth of machinery. Almost out of reach.
Mm-hmm. When did these inventions like the sled and begin to replace the human labor?
That is in the early 30s. The Depression brought on a whole lot of that. Couldn't. I have paid rent out of a bale of cotton time too and not have anything left over. Maybe have to take a little out of my own pocket. Cotton got down that cheap. Cotton really wouldn't be that cheap if you could got the market price, but they had what they call bases. And they spread the bases. You get ready to sell some cotton and break the bases would break again. That's the difference in the market of a certain grade of cotton and what they'd give you for it. I had an old German, I sold him a lot of cotton there one year. My cotton was worth about 8 cents. I happened to know the grade on it at that time. He offered me 5.5 cents on it. I asked him if cotton that grade and so on, what fit the market on it. It wasn't 8 something, I don't know. Yeah, he said, that's right. But he said the basis is broke again. I said, could you explain to me what the bases are where I could understand it? There? He says, maybe so. He says, maybe so, you got a horse worth $100. I know he's worth $100 too, and you know he's worth $100. But maybe I don't much want to buy him. You want to sell him to me anyhow. Maybe I'll give you $75 for him. I'll always remember that's what the basis. Well, that basis break, it wouldn't stay the same all the time, you know. The worse they wanted cotton, the higher it get, the narrower the basis would be on it. But then they get the competition, have it smothered out with basis break. Then they went from that to micing there, and I thought now we had it made, but that micing thing took us off the Christmas tree. This late cotton, we couldn't get by with it anymore after they started micing. They mic and take the sense of strength and everything now. You acquainted anything about cotton markets?
Well, the modern markets I'm not too acquainted with.
We got now on our co-op, we got telecot markets. That's helped us. But it's a pretty big deal. You know what the telecot is? Okay. Maybe more than I do.
Yeah, that's pretty fancy setup.
Yeah, that's sort of up to now.
Okay, Buford Jones, we talked about him. Do you know Walter Caffey? Walter Caffey?
Oh, yeah. I didn't know anything personal much of them. I knew them and met them.
Ed Carnes?
Knew of them.
Les Kellogg?
No, sir.
Kettner. Do you know any Kettners?
Kettner. There used to be a hotel down here, Kettner Hotel, some of the early people.
Here in Wilson?
Tahoka.
Tahoka.
Yes, sir.
Robert Kiker.
Yeah, knew him well, good friend of mine. Had a son, Robert Jr. He's a very good friend of mine.
Does he live around here?
He lives in Slayton now, he and his wife. They did live out here a few years ago. One of the finest men you ever would know, to have an opportunity, he and his wife they're very lovely people. Most interesting.
Have to give him a call.
I wish you'd do that. You'd enjoy it very much.
Lehman Mathis.
Mathis, I know several Mathis down here. We had a Judge Mathis court down here for years. They come from out about Grassland there, I think.
Let's see. D.C. Roberts.
Yes, sir. Preacher Roberts.
Was he a preacher?
We call him preacher. I don't know where he ever preached.
How come y'all called him that?
You know, I don't know. I really don't know, but he's Preacher Roberts. He's county clerk down here. He's got a strong opponent this time, a lady. He's had it for about 25 years.
Oh, okay, this probably was his father then. D.C. Roberts?
May been. Yeah, may been. I didn't know the young one. Now this Roberts down there, if you know the family, a very unfortunate thing happened out there. It's been several years ago, but his daughter, married daughter down there, damn nigger raped. And it all, you know, I don't know where I think they tried the nigger, maybe had him electrocuted. I forget what they done, but the girl, she lived over it, and as far as I know, is done all right.
W.C. Maxey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know about him. Arthur McCampbell?
McCandle?
McCampbell?
No, sir.
Chester McDonald.
Yes, sir. I knew some McDonald's.
Brother Mining.
You betcha.
Can you tell me a little bit about him?
He was one of their old timers. I lived by him over south here, and that is in the middle 20s, I guess. He had a boy, oldest boy named Dal. And then he had Dal, he was sort of tongue-tied, but a very lovable character. He was something else. He had a younger brother made a Baptist preacher. Dal was telling me about this boy. God had called him to preach. Dal, he wasn't so religious himself. He said, he tongue-tied, you know. But I just asked him about how did he know that God called him to preach. Well, he said, I couldn't go to sleep. I couldn't sleep at night. I just wake up, all I could see was GP. I told him, hell, that meant to get up and go pee. Fred was the boy's name. Now, they had a sister, quite a girl, and I believe she's Anthony's a drugstore someplace up there at Slayton now. And she would be quite interesting for you to talk with if you locate her.
Did you say what her name was?
No, but she's married. I don't know what her name is. I could find out.
At Anthony's?
Anthony's one of those places there in Slayton.
Okay.
But she's quite a girl.
Clyde Redmond.
Redmond? Yeah, I knew a Redmond cattle man. Cattle buyer.
Was that Mance Redmond?
I couldn't tell you.
I think Mance was the cattle buyer.
I had a trailer. He bought in traffic with him. Taking back and forth. No, nothing big deal.
Where did he live, do you know?
Cahokia.
Then he just drive around and visit everybody, see what they had available to trade. B.W. Reed.
Well, I knew several Reeds. One of the Reeds was co-op manager there at Gin, I think. I don't know where he is now, but I think he's still co-op manager somewhere. Good gin manager.
A.D. Stevens.
The Stephen landlord, one of the real old timers that I had. I don't know whether that could be that Stevens or not, possibly not. Moved from here to California, died in California.
Albert Taylor.
Yeah, you betcha.
Can you tell me a little bit about him?
There's a lot to tell about Albert Taylor. Oh, he had a big family, and they were a typical Western type kind of people. You still got that thing on? Oh, I don't want to tell you no more about them, but they were good people.
Uh-huh.